Today, I'm going to be telling you about my relationship with my father and how when I was younger, I didn't call him dad. I called him the boogeyman. I'm going to be telling you about the relationship I have with him now and the relationship I had with him when I was younger and how he was, very much so, the nightmare in my dreams. So, without further ado, thank you for letting me vent with you. Welcome to the Single Father Podcast. I am your host, Kendall Donaker. This podcast is dedicated for anyone out there who's dealing with mental health and fatherhood. You'll hear about my struggles, my defeats, my victories, my highs, my lows, my triumphs, my tribulations, and everything in between. I like to call this a collection of journal entries into my struggle in adapting to single fatherhood. Without further ado, let's take a look inside my journal, the Single Father Podcast. My relationship with my father now is a little bit complicated. It's not good, it's not great, it's not bad. It's just, it is what it is. We speak to each other more now as business partners or friends than we do as actual father and son. And I think a lot of it goes back to some of the experiences I had when I was younger and how each one of the memories I have with him until I was an adult were nothing less than traumatizing. So I think in order to explain the relationship I have with him now, I have to explain the memories I had when I was younger. Let's go back to my earliest memory. One of my earliest memories was watching him argue with my mom in a separate room with me peeking around the corner. I watched my mom cry in turmoil and tears, and I remember running over to him and with my little tiny arms hitting him, trying to get him away from my mom. That's my earliest memory. Another memory after that just gets more and more traumatizing as it continues. I remember standing on the top of the stairs with my siblings, watching my father verbally berate my mother and listening to her cry in pain and in tears, discomfort. Me and my siblings all watched it and heard it from the top of the stairs. And it happened all the time, but that memory in particular, I remember specifically because I was trying to get my siblings to go in another room to avoid them from the traumatizing experience that I still remember to this day. Another memory was, well, I came home from school one day. And you know how you walk into a room and you just automatically feel the negative energy in the room? Well, that happened. I came home from school and I walked in the door, and immediately what my dad says to me is not, "Hi, son, like, how was school today?" He said, "Did you know that your mom fucked the neighbor?" My mom cried at him and said, "Mike, why are you doing this? Kendall, please go to your room." And he said, "No, stay right here. I need you to know that your mom is a whore." I felt so uncomfortable. And I had to listen for maybe about 10 minutes of this inappropriate comments and verbal abuse from my father. And eventually, they finally let me go to my room. I went to my room, locked the door, and I stayed in there for the rest of the night, not wanting to get involved with their drama. But sometimes, well, almost all the time, my father would intentionally bring me into the drama. Nothing resonates more with that than my next memory. My next memory is important for two reasons. I'll tell you one of them now. I remember sleeping inside my bed and just peaceful, comfortable, a little kid, full of joy and the world at his hands. And I remember that night, my father dragged me out of my room and told me to come with him. He wouldn't tell me why at all. I said, where are we going? He wouldn't tell me. He just said, "Come with me." So he stood me up, put his hands on my shoulders, and walked me to his bedroom. He opened the door and my mom was standing right there, and he said, "Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of him," referring to myself. My mom started crying and asked me to go back to my room, and he said, "No, you can continue the conversation with your son right here." I don't remember what happens next. I don't remember if they allowed me to go back to my room or if I stayed there and listened to the whole conversation that they had. I just remember that was one of the most traumatic moments of my entire life. Later in the week, I remember that my mom would often sleep in my bed. I never knew why. I thought maybe she was just scared to go back to their room or maybe just angry at him. But I later found out that it was because my father did not allow her to stay in the same room as him. For what reason, I have no idea, but I remember how traumatic it was to always wake up and see my mom next to me on our twin bed and listening to her cry in the middle of the night. The next memory I had was a little bit more serious. I remember me, my dad, and my mom were in the living room watching TV. I fell asleep, but shortly after I was woken up to loud screaming. I was scared and confused, and I didn't want to get involved, so I pretended that I was still asleep, with my eyes slightly open so I could see what was going on. Their argument persisted to be louder and more intense. Eventually, my dad threw a remote at my mom's face. I quickly jotted up and ran towards him and told him to never touch my mom again in his life. His response? That's not my son, get him out of my face. I was angry and furious. Knowing I couldn't take him, I run downstairs and I ran across the street and I told my neighbor the abuse that was going on in the house. My mom shortly chased after me, grabbed me, and told my neighbor that I was just being silly and misunderstood what was going on. She dragged me back in the house and told me everything would be okay, but to never do anything like that again. I remember the next memory after that. Someone accidentally put a for sale sign in front of our house. Some random realtor that got the wrong address. But at the time, my mother nor I knew that. My mother started crying when she saw that. Frantic, she called my dad and asked him if he was divorcing her and just sold the house out of the blue. My dad, knowing damn well that he had nothing to do with it, led her to believe that he did. I listened to them stay on the phone for about an hour of my mom begging and pleading. As a stay-at-home mom, she was worried and scared. For an hour, my dad let this go on, and finally admitting that he had nothing to do with it. I hated him after that, putting my mom through that much pain. The only words I can sum up with is just evil. There would oftentimes be moments where I had friends come over the house, and randomly he would ask them to leave. I never knew why, and neither did my mom. I would ask, "Why did dad tell my friends to leave?" And she never knew why. Never. Later in life, I would ask a therapist about that, and she told me that often abusers will try to isolate their victims. They don't want their victims happy. They don't want them to be engaged with other people in the house. They want them isolated, alone. Abusers only want their victims to be in the company of them and them alone. And it all just suddenly made sense to me. See, my dad was cold. He was just an asshole, you know? I remember one time I asked him, "Dad, do you believe in God?" Me as a young kid, maybe let's say 10, he said, "You have no right to ask me that." That was his response to a 10-year-old asking him if he believes in God. Why I remember that to this day, I'm not sure, but I think it's just because it was so shocking to me. The responses that my dad would give. When my dad was angry, you could feel it in the house. The whole house knew he was angry. You felt uncomfortable being next to him. And he has no problem putting you down in front of people, making you feel less than yourself. I saw him do that to my mom time and time and time again. And finally, one day in not college, but high school, we had a family meeting and they told us that they were getting a divorce. Something that I didn't even bat an eye at. I was almost happy at the thought. Later, I found out that my mom said, "Your dad was a little upset that you didn't show an emotion." I said, "Well, no one really wants to see their parents not together, but in this case, I knew that it was for my mom's best interest." Now, things took a turn there for the worse. There was a time where I felt a little weird about how the divorce all went out. My mom ended up leaving him for my dad's business partner and said, "We're leaving the house, we're moving, and we're moving into with this new business partner and a new home." And at the time, when my mom said jump, I jumped. So I didn't bat an eye at it. And of course, I didn't really like my dad that much anyway. I thought he was the boogeyman. He made me feel uncomfortable, unsafe. I was afraid of him. Mostly just afraid of, well, for my mom. But eventually, things at my mom's house got a little bad too. Her personality started to change. And it made me search for someone who was different, I guess. So I ended up calling my dad and I said, "I thought about it. You haven't really done anything to me. I didn't mention that, well, you did a shit ton to my mom, but you've been in my life just as long as she has, and I think I wanna go over to your house." But when I did that, my mom changed permanently. She didn't like that I went over to his house, and she started doing a whole lot of things to me, let's just say, that I equally thought were evil, and it broke my heart. It broke my heart because this woman that I've protected from all of my life is suddenly acting evil, all because I wanna see my dad. I couldn't believe it. I've protected you all my life, and you're just as evil as he is. And their divorce was horrible. It wasn't the type of divorce where, well, separation where I tell you guys about my separation with my child's mother was much, much worse. CPS was involved, allegations were involved, there were threats of jail time, everything, it was just so extreme. But I was the oldest, and they needed me. They needed me to testify, to see to testify to everything that I saw in the house, but I wanted no part of it. No matter what, I was not going to be a part of hurting my parents, neither one of them. Whether I like them or not, I will not be a part of this. So they started trying to manipulate me, threaten me, blackmail me, secretly record me. Both of them. I remember on Thanksgiving and Christmas, me and my dad got in a fist fight because he threatened to take the kids away from my mom. Eh, it was just a horrible experience for me. They made me feel uncomfortable, they made me feel unsafe. My own parents. I was so afraid, and I'm just lost. I was lost. And there was a good period there where I felt like committing suicide. I thought that the only way for me to escape my parents was for me to die. But I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that because my siblings, they needed me. I need to protect my siblings. And I've always been the type of person that gets a little bit weird about death. I'm afraid of what comes next. But anyways, I felt like there was no way out until there was, until I turned 18, and finally I could escape my parents. Now, for any of you listening to the podcast for a long period of time, know that in between that period, CBS got involved. My nana adopted me. I went to 4 different high schools in the period of me being in Las Vegas. Um, I went to a behavior school. I got expelled for weed. Again, 4 different high schools, and finally I graduated, and I had enough of Vegas, and I had to move away to Reno to get away from my family, to get away from my parents, to get away from everything. Even my siblings were just lost in this manipulative behavior, this brainwashing um, regimen that was my mother. In the course of that time, my dad did not get to see his kids anymore. Even though he's gotten, I think, 50-50 custody, my mom manipulated my siblings into believing allegations against my dad and made them believe that he was equally the boogeyman. I can't speak for my siblings specifically. I don't know. I can say the allegations were false, but the way they feel about him, that's their own choice. So he does not get to see his own children anymore and hasn't for about 11 years. Neither have I. I haven't spoke or seen my siblings in about 11 years, and somehow I'm comfortable with that. I I rejoice at the ability to get away from my family. And you know what? I feel like if my siblings want to learn the truth one day, they can come to me. But if not, I have my own family to worry about. My anxiety in college was horrible. I started getting panic attacks all the time. My dad, though, was the one person that I started staying in contact with a little bit. He was paying for my phone bill, and I was talking to him while I was in college periodically. One day, he asked me to pay for my phone bill myself. Said, "I can't help you anymore," and made some derogatory comments about maybe, yeah, I could help him in court against my mom, and if I don't, then I'd have to continue to pay for my phone bill. Again, the same manipulation and tactics that I've been experiencing all my life, and suddenly I just had enough. I went to AT&T and I said, "If I get on my own phone plan, would I still be responsible for the phone plan for my dad?" And they said, "No, he's responsible for that. You can get on your own phone plan, and Basically be your own man. And I did just that. I got on my own phone plan, left him with my old one, and blocked his number and haven't spoke to him for many, many years. Or my mom. Years later, the Vegas shooting happened, and I just wanted to reach out to him and ask if he was okay. So I reached out and I said, you know, I, I'm not in Vegas, but I heard of the shooting. Are you all right? He emailed me back and he said, I'm fine. And we started just sending a few emails to each other. He told me he was getting married and he has a new kid. I told him I have a baby on the way and I'm moving back to Vegas. And he invited me to his wedding. I went to his wedding. I met my stepmom. I met the I guess my stepsister, and it was all groovy. And we started becoming a little bit closer after that. I said I'm moving out back to Vegas, and I got to find a new place soon, and kind of figuring that out. And he said, "Well, I spoke to my new wife about it, and you can stay with us for a couple months if you want, and until you find your own place." And I said, "Well, sure, no problem." As I stayed with him, one thing was apparent: he was a new person. I didn't see the boogeyman anymore. I saw a person who loves his new kid and loves his new wife and is trying everything he can to be a better person. I didn't see the asshole that I saw when I was a kid. I saw a new man, a, a dad that I thought I've always wanted. But that didn't last long. As I stayed there a couple months in, I just started to see little glimpses of the man that he was. When he was mad, say it with me, the whole house could feel it. I saw him every once in a while berate my stepmom, put her down, told me, never get married, Kendall, right in front of her. Clearly on her face, she didn't like that. I saw, there was one time she complained that they didn't really have a good honeymoon. And right in front of her parents, he said, you try being sick. I'm sick. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. I just felt this kind of disgusted by it again. Like, here you are with a second chance and you're going back to your old behaviors. And you know what? He got content. Now he's married. He has her. Now he's in control. And he loves being in control. He loves putting women down. He loves letting them know that he's the boss. But he didn't have a lot of money. In fact, my entire life, he was always trying to start this business of his that never really got running. And when he got married to my stepmom, he says, I have this business and it's going to get running. I remember when I was younger, he would often try to get the hustle on. He would make me sell waters with him on the strip. And I'd have people come out and seize our water buckets, and I'd get in trouble on his behalf because you can't sell waters on the strip in front of casinos. I just remember he'd always have a scheme or something up his sleeve. Well, my stepmom was a very successful real estate agent. And he was kind of a stay-at-home dad that was trying to get his business up and running. The point being, she didn't need to put up with that shit. And, spoiler alert, she didn't. After months and months of living in that house and watching him berate her, put her down, his anger getting the best of him, it got bad. And, I found an opportunity to finally move out. I did. I'd say 2 months later, they're getting a divorce. She kicked him out. It's funny because there's a point where he told me in that time of me living with him that drama surrounds me. I look at him and I said, "You are the cause of my drama." Now, remember earlier when I said that that memory was important for 2 reasons? Let me tell you the second reason. The second reason was because when I was happy seeing him become a different person for his new family, I wanted to be a part of it. In fact, the only thing I've ever wanted was a family, the thing that I've lost, the thing that I've been trying to get back from the moment my daughter was born is a family. The only thing that I've ever wanted in life, a family. the thing that I crave more than anything in the world, a family. So I thought if I told him something personal, that we'd have this moment with each other that defines our relationship moving forward, and I'd finally have the dad that I always wanted. So I told him, Dad, when I was younger, you dragged me out of my room in the middle of the night, and you used me as a shield against you and my mother. I want to let you know how traumatic that was for me, but I also want to heal from it. His response, do you think he apologized and we hugged each other and that was it? No, 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 no. His response was this. He said, I don't remember that happening, but if you would have testified against your mother in court, maybe I'd still see my children, your siblings. So I guess we all have things that each of us have done that we don't like. I looked at him and I just said, you know what? You're right. No problem. But what I really said in my head is, I guess that's it. I will never have the relationship that I always wanted from you. And that's fine. I have my daughter, and that's what's important. See, I don't value family like most of you listening do. I value the family that I make. The family, the family that I have with my daughter. That's the only thing that I really value. I blame him. I didn't have a good example on how to be a man and how to treat a woman and how to be a father. In fact, I learned the very opposite from him. I blame him. I'm responsible for my own actions, yes, but where did I learn these actions from? What did I grow up with? And how we are now? I'll tell you that's not much different. We talk as almost like we're friends or business partners, and he still makes me uncomfortable when he's angry. And and once again, I'm on his phone plan, and you don't know how uncomfortable that it makes me because I don't like anyone having anything over me. If I'm mad at you, maybe I'll turn your phone bill off or stop paying your phone bill or something like that. My parents only know one thing: conditional love. The moment my daughter was born, I knew one thing: unconditional love. It's a fundamental difference. If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need in one place. Let me explain. Anchor has the tools to allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. It's everything you need in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Side note, he's not my biological father. He's been there since I was born, but he's not my biological father. I call him my dad, but he's not my biological father. My biological father, my entire life, I was told was dead. Um, that he raped my mom. He was in jail, and all this crazy things. Come to find out, he's this pastor in Michigan that was kind of robbed of me when he was younger. Basically, the story goes in the condensed version. My mom got mad at him and said, You're no longer seeing your child, and moved away across the country, never told him where I was, and that was that. Now, I'll tell you why I don't want a relationship with him. I met him one time on my high school graduation. He flew down here. I met him. It was fine. And he went back. But why I don't want a relationship is when my daughter was born, I knew that I would go to the ends of the earth. I would go to hell and back. I would move mountains to be with my daughter. And he didn't do that for me. And that's just something that I can't forgive. Now you can say, well, your mom moved away and blah, blah, blah. I don't care. I don't care. I know what I would do. I know the love in my heart for my daughter. And if someone didn't do that for me, then they don't have the love that I have for my daughter. That's my relationship with my parents. That's my relationship with my father. That's the example that I have. But I promise you here today, that if I ever have a son, I'm going to change this. I'm going to show my daughter what it means for a man to be in her life. I am a single black father. I am proud of it. And I am proud to say that I am now the man that I've always wanted to be and will continue to better myself for my daughter. My definition of a man is someone who tries to do the very best thing and searches for the best thing to do, even when it doesn't benefit them. I love my daughter, and I'm here to tell you today, I'm a good father. Thank you for letting me vent.